So this is the second year that we are providing Startup Women as an annual program, offering support to early stage women identifying entrepreneurs across Canada. And we do that through topic-focused webinars, industry advisory circles, and one-on-one meetings with startup women leaders. Because, we know that when you support women, you support an entire nation.
Not everyone makes the news, but behind every growth-driving experience, product, and transformation are experts who shape the outcome. Welcome to Behind the Growth, a podcast for digital leaders and those aspiring to become one. Each episode features a candid conversation with a remarkable individual. Join us as we focus on their struggles, wins, and lessons learned you won't find anywhere else. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Behind the Growth. I'm your host, Imran Mia. Small businesses are the backbone of any economy, and Canada is no different. There are between 900,000 to 1 million Canadian businesses that exist at any given time. Every year, some 95,000 new businesses are registered in Canada, as compared to, let's say, the state of California, where there are about 150,000 businesses that are registered every year. To put things in perspective, about 13 million Canadians are employed in the small to mid-sized businesses, and it contributes roughly about 50% to the GDP. In order for Canada to be competitive on the global stage, we must embrace and support the startup ecosystem in Canada. Today, I'm very excited to welcome Liesl Mulholland, Lead for Global Startup, and Isabel Nolan, Lead for Startup Women. They both represent Startup Canada, an organization focused on helping Canadians with their startup businesses. Welcome, Liesl and Isabel.
Thank you for having us.
We can start with Liesl. Liesl, tell us a little bit about your role and your journey, and how did you end up with Startup Canada?
Yeah, so my background is in international trade and export development. I'm originally from the Caribbean, so I've worked with companies in the startup community in Barbados and across the Caribbean. I moved to Canada in 2013, and I've been in that space working with provincial business support organizations. So this opportunity came up last year to be the program lead for Startup Global, one of the flagship programs at Startup Canada. And so I'm pretty new to the organization, started in November and running that program. So looking to support any entrepreneurs or any startup businesses that are looking to export or they're early stage exporters and trying to navigate that space.
Wonderful. We'll get into a bit more about the program, details and what it's about. Let me now go to Isabel. Isabel, tell us a little bit about your journey as well. And where are you based actually in Canada?
Yeah, so I'm actually calling on the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations, also known as Vancouver. As you can probably tell by my accent, I'm not originally from Canada. I moved over here from Ireland about 3.5 years ago. I'm
That
not.
makes the three of us.
Yes.
And most of us in Canada. Anyway, I think I was reading one of the stats that said, I think around 60% of at least the GTA population was not born in Canada. And I'm sure it's probably true for the rest of Canada as well. But sorry to interrupt.
Absolutely.
Please continue.
So yeah, I started my career in event management in Dublin. And when I moved over here, I still wanted to stay within the event space, but I was very much done with hospitality. And I had great opportunity of meeting a man called Paul Broussard, who co-founded a business called Volition. And they were very much known for their pitch nights among other services that they provide startups and entrepreneurs. And that was my first training in entrepreneurship and the entire ecosystem. And having moved to a city, not knowing a lot of people, I, dived at that opportunity because it meant that I got to meet new people in the city and I was getting to network. And I just really loved the community that surrounded it, and especially in Vancouver. But the more you go into the ecosystem in Canada, you realize that even though it's such a large country, it's actually quite a small community. And everyone's interconnected in some way. So then I stayed with that company Volition for almost 2 years. And then when the opportunity for the program lead at Startup Canada arose, I jumped at it. So I've been at Startup Canada for a year and a half now and absolutely loving it, leading on the Startup Women program.
Amazing. So let's go into talking a little bit about the organization. So Isabel, maybe, tell us a little bit about what Startup Canada is all about.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Startup Canada is a national nonprofit that is the gateway to Canada's entrepreneurial ecosystem. So we're here to connect entrepreneurs with support, community, and tools they'll need to start and grow their business successfully in Canada and also beyond, hopefully. And since launching in 2012, so we're just over 10 years old, Startup Canada has grown to support more than 130,000 entrepreneurs annually, and we have an ever growing community of ecosystem partners from coast to coast to coast. We're a small and mighty team, but yeah, we're really here to we show for entrepreneurs, and we're here to support them on their journey.
And there's various different programs, and you are responsible for the women program, right?
Mhm. Yeah, that's correct. So for Startup Women, as you can kind of tell by the name, it's dedicated to showing up for women all year round. So this is the second year that we are providing Startup Women as an annual program, offering support to early stage women identifying as entrepreneurs across Canada. And we do that through topic focused webinars, industry advisory circles, and one on one meetings with startup women leaders. Because, we know that when you support women, you support an entire nation.
100%. I have a little bit of an interest in politics as well. And in politics, we always say add women and make politics better. You know, the more women and I'm a big supporter of women in business, of course, being a father of two girls myself, but particularly women in technology. I think we need to see a lot more of that in Canada and across the globe.
Mhm.
So let me go over to Liesl a little bit. Liesl, I have many friends that are focused on the Canada Startup Visa program, which kind of attracts entrepreneurs from outside of Canada. Your role is sort of a little bit of reversal of that. You are focused on startups and small to medium size or small businesses that are based in Canada, but you help them grow across the globe. So tell us a little bit about your program.
Yes, no problem. So, the Startup Global program connects entrepreneurs wanting to build global businesses with the network of international ecosystem partners. So, throughout the year, similar to the Startup Women program, this runs, throughout the year. I think last year was the first year that we started offering a bunch of opportunities right through the year as opposed to limited around just the pitch competition. So throughout the year, we host several live webinars, entrepreneur and global panels. We have our Startup Global Pitch competition. We also offer in-kind support to our participants using a platform called Mentorly, where they can book office hours with experts who volunteer their time throughout the year to set up, one-on-one Ask the Expert sessions with them. And we have a Startup Global portal. So all the tools and resources from our partners like UPS, EDC, we are co-presenting partners as well as our global ecosystem partners. They provide different resources and tools, which are all housed in our global portal. So businesses can register there and then have access to all of these tools there.
Great. You mentioned that this organization was started in 2012. So, can you give us a sense of from the time of its inception till today, how many small businesses have you or this organization helped? And I would also like to understand what is sort of the split between women entrepreneurs versus, the overall program.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think tracking some of the data from most recently, and I think Isabel mentioned earlier, we've generally supported over 130,000 entrepreneurs annually. I'm sure when we first started in 2012, I'm not sure if that would have been the number that was hit because a new organization gaining momentum. So, but I think it's fair to say that that with over the years, the brand recognition has increased and many entrepreneurs or other partners see Startup Canada as like the convener and ecosystem and like the first hub or the first stop that SMEs can come to to access this. In terms of the breakdown, it's about of women entrepreneurs, year to year in our programs versus overall. I'm not sure if like you have those stats at hand.
I don't necessarily have the number of women in relation to global, but I know I can speak to last year's Startup Women program. We had over 4,500 participants in that program last year. So we held over 27 events. And then that's also, we had our one-on-one meetings with startup women leaders, which is sort of our take on mentorship. So yeah, last year alone, it was just over 4,500 entrepreneurs within the Startup Women program.
So that's great. Maybe you can walk us through the journey. Let's say my wife wanted to start a new business. She always comes up with new ideas. Sometimes she wants to write a book. Sometimes she wants to start up some, new business. If she wanted to sort of, get into it, what would be her journey from the time she thought about an idea to commercializing her idea? What kind of support? And she came to you guys. Can you walk us through the steps?
Yeah, we very much position ourselves as the convener within the ecosystem. So we encourage any aspiring entrepreneurs, any entrepreneurs that are just starting out to reach out to us, taking your wife into account, for example, assuming that she identifies as a woman, she can of course reach out to myself. The way that we've designed our programs, and they're not necessarily a cohort that we bring through the entire year, but rather entrepreneurs can choose to be as engaged as they would like to be and as engaged as they feel they need to. So we have a variety of different topics to help with those early stage building blocks. So your wife will be able to sort of peruse all the different topics I have for the entire year. So we've got one on how to build customer trust with a brand strategy happening at the end of May. Perhaps that's something that would be useful. We also have a few on like financing and fundraising. So depending on what her needs are, we also do industry advisory circles, which is they're closed door sessions that are really meant to bring together early stage and aspiring entrepreneurs within each of the spaces. So, for example, in March, we did one for women in STEM. We also are doing one for women in agriculture in May. So it's bringing together entrepreneurs from that space and having them listen to later stage entrepreneurs within that space to learn from them, learn from their journey and see, okay, how can I sort of not replicate, but, sort of follow along what they did and follow along their success and also do a lot of resource sharing. So the program is really, it's a series of these topic focused industry specific events that they can be as engaged as they want. And we also have a resource guide on our Startup Women homepage they can download and use. And yeah, as I mentioned, the Startup Women program, it is about 70% of the community is quote unquote early stage or aspiring entrepreneurs. Whereas with Startup Global, we find that they're a little bit more further along their journey. So it's kind of the next step, I guess, especially if you're an entrepreneur that identifies as a woman, going on to global is sort of the next step for you.
That's interesting. I once started my own startup a few years ago before my career at Mobile Live. And, my friend and I came up with an idea to create a software platform. So we built it, and then we didn't really know how to really market it and how to generate revenue from it. So we started looking at some of the programs that the government offers for funding. And it was so confusing to really navigate. And there's so much support available, federally and perhaps provincially as well. Is this something you guys also help navigate, the new entrepreneurs, the startups, to help them match with the right sort of programs that the governments offer?
Yeah, so I think that's one of the things that it's the feedback that we get a lot, or you hear a lot from entrepreneurs, that there's definitely no shortage of information available or support available out there, whether provincially or federally in Canada, but it's the time taken that or is needed to navigate that information, especially if you are running your own business. So you're in the process of, producing a widget or developing your services, you're running that business, but you also don't have then what is now another full-time job of trying to navigate the sources of funding. And I think this is, we try to help demystify and help that in terms, especially with like our partnerships with, the Trade Commissioner Service and the Export Development Canada's and these different organizations that we're trying to bring everyone together in, the same space in our Startup Canada ecosystem, essentially, so that any entrepreneur knows, okay, if I have a question, this is the first place that I can come to and be able to navigate and see, where the tools are, where the resources are. And while, we don't necessarily, we're not an organization that necessarily provides that one-on-one business consulting or business advice to businesses, we do, have that platform and give them that availability and access to persons at these organizations. So through the Mentorly platform for both Startup Global and Startup Women, as we said, people that register, businesses that register have, throughout the year an opportunity to book X number of one-on-one meetings with an expert in an area that, they're particularly interested in or they have some questions on, and to get that, high level access to a C-level executive or a consultant or with that expertise, I think is invaluable, especially for, an entrepreneur, a small and medium-sized business. We're kind of giving them that platform where they don't now have to, Google or go LinkedIn and try to find someone who they want to meet with. But we have their profiles. We have these experts' profiles on Mentorly. They can see their areas of expertise and they can just, get in there, book that meeting. So I think, yeah, we are, trying to be in that space, demystifying and presenting, the information in a way that it's accessible and it's digestible, but not overwhelming for an entrepreneur.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We talked a little bit about the programs in Canada. I want to spend a couple minutes talking about the global program that you're responsible for, Liesl. What's the criterion for any small to mid business that's based in Canada to be able to leverage your expertise if they wanted to go outside of Canada and sell and position their services? How would one go about getting help on that front?
Yeah, and I think in general, so we do have, and I mentioned earlier, a global pitch competition, which we will be running throughout this year also. So keep an eye out or ear out for that. With the pitch competition, that's where the criteria is very specific in terms of, revenue needs to be $1 million or less. Number of employees 0 to 9, based in Canada, or at least 51% co-owners are based and running the business from Canada. So that is, some specific criteria for the global pitch competition. But in terms of the overall global program, we don't gatekeep. So for example, if I'm a startup business, if someone has a startup business that has been in operation for more than 3 years, so 3 years, less than 3 years is the, Business Development Canada definition of what a startup is. So we also go with that definition, for the purposes of, say, the pitch competition. But in general, if someone's coming to us to access information or they want to sign up to a webinar, that is not going to be a gatekeeping criteria that, oh, your business is 5 years old, you can't register for this webinar or you can't access the Mentorly platform. So I think for any startup businesses within Canada looking to access the Startup Global program, it's more, you are a new business or relatively new, but that we know that, the growth stage can take a while. So a business may have been incorporated 5, 6 years ago, but they've only really started putting in a lot of the work maybe in the last 2 years or the last year, or they've, been established 6 years ago, but they are only now thinking about exporting within the last year. So they're not going to be excluded from accessing the Startup Global platform. So really it's, the business is based here in Canada, or at least 51% operating, from here, and looking to having an interest in generating export revenue for the country. So looking to access getting their product or services outside of Canada, and usually what we've obviously noticed, no surprise here, the first market is, our neighbor to the south, to the US. So in a lot of the research gathered from last year's Startup Global of all the participants who registered in the portal, some of the markets that they identified as their top 5, export markets, the US was top of the list. Some of the other markets were France, Germany, UK, and Australia. And that top five remains relatively unchanged over the last 2 years, but we are seeing a trend or a change in the top 10. And I think this has to do with a bit of what you mentioned. And you pointed out earlier that all three of us are not from here. So a lot of the immigration trends and, movement of people, and you touched on the startup visa program with a lot of those trends and, the different diasporas that are being formed and developed in Canada. I think that is also playing into some of the countries now that people living in Canada are looking or interested in exporting. So, 1 year you might see a spike in an interest in Syria or interest in Lebanon, and that can align with the trends of what's happening at the time in those countries. As people relocate here, they still want to be connected to the country that they're from, so they're looking at opportunities to either bring product in to set up a business and then sell somewhere else. So we're seeing some trends like that. Some other countries that are traditionally not in the top five are creeping up and getting increasing in popularity in the top 10.
Yeah, that's interesting. Are you able to sort of highlight? You mentioned the geography. Of course, the United States, we do 80% of our trade is with them. But, going beyond the US into Europe and Middle East and Far East, et cetera, for the members and customers that you deal, do you have a sense of which products or services they're more focused on exporting from Canada?
Yeah, based on our entrepreneur profile that we collected in the past year, and this is data when you register into the portal. We're able to access this information, and that gives us an idea to track all the trends. So, Isabel touched on earlier some of the impact of the Startup Women program. So, for global, for example, we had about a total program engagement last year of about over 6,000 person. And then of those 6,000 people who, either attended webinars or participated in pitch, etc., we had over 1,000 actual register in the global portal. So this is data pulling from about 1,100 registrants in the portal, covering 284 cities across Canada. So, I think that gives you an idea. We all know Canada's a large country, and we're trying to reach as much as possible and not just focused on the urban centers, the more popular ones. So it's good to see like that entrepreneur profile, and 50% of the participants in global were actually women. And we've seen that increase over the years. And I think about 40% identified as a visible minority and about 5% identified as Indigenous and First Nations. So in terms of their company profile or, the sectors, some of the top industries we see are a lot of IT, so information tech and high tech industries. That's the number one. Second is definitely healthcare, social assistance, and biosciences. Agriculture and food and agri-food and forestry would be number three. And this is based on the data pulled from that portal profile last year. Number four would be AI. So, I mean, I think you can't turn anywhere right now without people talking about chat GPT and AI.
100%,
So no
100%.
no surprise there that, last year that was one of the top that was industry number four that our participants in global were working in, focused on and exporting. And then number five is educational services. And then, rounding out the top 10, we're looking at arts, media, clean tech, food services and accommodation and advanced manufacturing. So I think that gives you kind of the general scope of some of the sectors involved.
Thank you very much. We're about coming up on our time. I do want to ask you one last question. Looking at some of the stats in terms of new startups, 95,000 every year, new businesses that get registered every year. Only 80% of those that register go on to staying in business the second year. And by year 10, about 60% of those businesses have already disappeared. So my question to both of you is, you guys deal with entrepreneurs every day and businesses. What advice or what are some of the things that you would say are common mistakes that entrepreneurs make that result in sort of businesses not sort of going forward successfully?
Yeah, I think not realizing when they don't know what they don't know, it's really important to build a community around you that is there to support, whether that's mentors or advisors, and leaning on people who have the expertise that you necessarily don't. There's always something that you're going to be really knowledgeable in your business, but there will come a time where, you may not know about the marketing side of things, or, the best way to pitch your company, or whatever it may be. So I think recognizing when you don't know what you don't know, and leaning on someone for that support to help you navigate that roadblock. And I think once you kind of accept that help, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs might feel, this is my company, it's my baby, and I want to bring it through and make it succeed. But it takes a lot of people to build a successful company, and it can't hurt to reach out and get support.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and I think to build on what Isabel said, and having, as an entrepreneur, I think you're so invested in your baby and your business, and you have those blinders on, and you want to hold on to that tightly. So it's good to, from the beginning, have that core group around you, but ensure that that group, while they're supporting you, are also going to be challenging you, right? And helping you see beyond. You might have your 2-year strategy. You just want to get your business up and running and do this, but helping you to see a bit beyond that. And, you might think, well, no, my market is right here. I'm just going to sell to customers here. I'm good. But challenging you to think, well, what would an export strategy look like? Maybe not for today, but just building that in place. I think trying, like, there's that earnest and energy with a lot of startups of, just getting out there and getting it done, which is great. And that's the, vibe in the ecosystem, but also just having that capacity to build the structures and systems in place to make it sustainable, so that, if you remove yourself from your business, how can it still run or function without you being the piece of the business? So, trying to create that more sustainable business, and that legacy, and just thinking with that longer term legacy building mindset would be one of my suggestions.
100%. And I think in the industry, we always hear about ideation and also, doing enough research and validation of your idea before you go too big. It's always advisable to start small, validate your idea. And then, there's also this saying that goes like this, if you're going to fail fast, and move on or pivot. And then the last thing I would say is there's help available. So entrepreneurs should not shy away from seeking help and leveraging the resources that are available. And I think Startup Canada is one of those organizations that is there to help those entrepreneurs who have ideas they want to commercialize. So I would encourage, to all my listeners and viewers, if you have an idea, you want to commercialize it, get in touch with Startup Canada and leverage their expertise, and, go ahead and, of course, launch your business. Just to conclude, I want to say thank you so much to Liesl and Isabel for being on the podcast this morning. Do you want to give out the contact information for people to be able to get in touch with Startup Canada? How do they go about getting in touch?
Absolutely. Yep. So you can head to our website, which is startupcan.ca. And from there, you can navigate to each program's own homepage. Each of our programs also has an email dedicated to that program. So for women, if you're looking for more information on the Startup Women program, you can email women@startupcan.ca.
Thank you so much for being my guest this morning. I really appreciate it. And until next time, we'll be back with another episode of Behind the Growth. Take care of yourself, and bye for now.
Thanks for listening to Behind the Growth. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow along on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. This podcast is brought to you by Mobile Live, a team of digital experts specializing in designing experiences, building products, and scaling technology. For more episodes of Behind the Growth, please visit mobilelive.ca/podcast.